Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today I bring you Peter Docker. The end of 2016 is in sight. Let me ask you this. Are you where you thought you would be at this point in the year? Are you still looking for more clarity and focus in your life, thinking that it's going to come just after you get through the next week or the next month or next year? Well, I've got news for you. It won't. Not unless you take real, concrete action to make it happen. If you're looking to get clear on your goals and learn how to create a plan to achieve them, then join me and 5 other motivated high performers to learn a powerful 4-step system starting December 5th. It's called Reveal Your Path, and I've now guided dozens of high performers through it, including professional athletes, Olympians, neurosurgeons, MBAs, college coaches, and others, resulting in clarity, focus, and balance in their lives so that they can get the right things done and stop trying to be everything to everyone. They've been able to start new businesses, reconnect with their kids and their spouses, and find balance, get promotions, lose weight. They've created new habits and broken old habits, and they've found the clarity that they were looking for, and they're now confident that they're taking the right action because they're seeing results like better relationships, increased income, more time in their day. Reveal Your Path isn't for everyone, though. But if you're sitting there feeling like you're pulled in too many different directions, like you just have this potential that you're currently not fulfilling, then Reveal Your Path is for you. Take Isaac, for example, who just finished with my last Reveal Your Path team. He said this. He said, "This whole process has brought me back to my roots, to where I was most successful when I was younger, organized, hungry, and driven. This is getting me back to waking up early, setting goals, and writing things down. I'm understanding where I need to be and where I need to work instead of just trying to survive." Do you feel like Isaac felt? Do you feel like you're just trying to survive? Do you want to, again, feel organized and hungry and driven? Another recent team member named Irina, she said this just a couple of weeks ago. She said, "I feel like I've taken a huge leap forward, like I went straight from first gear to fourth gear." What would going from first gear to fourth gear feel like in your life? What would that feel like right now, this very moment? What would it feel like tomorrow morning when you woke up? Where would you be a year from now when you're staring down, a couple months from now at 2018? Isaac and Irina are both set up now to have a great finish to 2016 and an even more amazing 2017. If you've heard me talk about Reveal Your Path before and you've considered it but just haven't taken the leap, I just want to give you this heads up. This December team is the last time that I'm going to be offering it at this price. So if you've been waiting, now is the time to act before it's too late. And so for this December team, what we're going to do instead of the typical 4 weeks is we're going to do 2 weeks in December. We're going to take a 2-week break for the holidays to really let you focus on your family and also to really work on the activities that we've been working on. And then we'll finish the next 2 weeks in January so you're prepared for an amazing 2017. So here's what I want you to do next. Go to jimharshawjr.com/call and grab a time on my calendar. We're just going to jump on a 15-minute phone call so that I can give you a taste of the clarity that Reveal Your Path will give you. And the goal of this call will be to help you create an action plan for just one area of your life. And this is totally free. My hope is that you'll see so much amazing results from just a short 15-minute phone call that you actually decide to join us in December. If not, you'll be better off just for having had the call, and I'm going to be better off for having made the call just because I'll be doing what I love, which is helping people. And that's just go to jimharshawjr.com/call. Again, that's jimharshawjr.com/call. I look forward to talking to you. A leadership consultant and executive coach, Peter Docker is passionate about enabling people to be extraordinary. A former senior Royal Air Force officer and professional pilot, Peter is now dedicated to sharing his insights into how human beings operate, communicate, and relate, specializing in organizational culture and leadership. Collaborating with Simon Sinek for over 5 years, he is an igniter and implementation specialist on the Start With Why team. Peter has worked with several of the largest companies in the world. He delivers keynote talks and is a regular contributor to Simon Sinek's blog and podcast series. As usual, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you know that you can grab the action plan from this episode. If you don't have time to listen to the entire show, or if you hear something you like, just grab the action plan, go to jimharshawjr.com/action. That's jimharshawjr.com/action, and I'll have about a 2-page PDF with all the highlights, tips, tactics, and links that we talk about here in today's show. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hello, Jim. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to be with you. And I'm calling you from the States, and you are over in the UK.
I am indeed.
So let's talk about your time in the Royal Air Force. And so I read something, and tell me if this is true, that you flew then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher around the world.
Yes, I did. I mean, that's in the dim and distant past, obviously. I think I was thinking back there. I must have been around about 25, maybe 24 years old. And I wasn't the only guy who flew around. I just happened to be selected to be a number of pilots who made up the crews that flew her around the world. And I remember actually in particular flying her over to the States to see your then President Reagan, because I think they got along quite well.
Yeah.
But yes, that was a great privilege, and certainly is a memory that sticks in my mind quite clearly.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, what a memory, what an experience. So let's dive into the Start With Why stuff here. For the listener, if you haven't listened to Simon Sinek's sort of landmark TED Talk called Start With Why, definitely check it out. As a matter of fact, I'll just link it up. I'll put the link in the action plan. So if you're looking for that, I'll just have the link for that in the action plan. But talk to me and the listener about what does it mean? What does Start With Why mean, and why is that important?
Well, the idea is really very, very simple. Simon made this discovery some years ago now, that when he looked at the companies, the leaders that seem to attract so many followers and seem to have unparalleled success over the long term, he noticed that something connected them all together. And that thing was that they all think, act, and communicate in exactly the same way. And it's the complete opposite to most other people. And he codified it in what he calls the Golden Circle, which is a very simple model, which basically says that everybody knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it. And in business, you call that your differentiating proposition, your USP, what makes you special or different. But very few people know why it is they do what they do. And by why, we don't mean to make a profit or get an income. That's a result. That's always a result. By why, we mean, what's your cause? What's your higher purpose? What's your belief? Why do you get out of bed each day? What drives you? And as a consequence, most of us think, act, and communicate starting with what? We start off with the real clear thing and move our way through until it gets a bit fuzzy. But the inspired leaders, the inspired organizations, they think, act, and communicate starting with why. That higher purpose, that cause. So that's the basis of the model, and obviously we can go into more detail if you like.
Yeah, let's go into more detail. I mean, how does this change companies? I know you work with a lot of companies on this. I imagine you probably, companies are made up of people. So how do you work with companies and people?
Well, let's build on that idea a little bit more as we answer that question, Jim. The example that Simon gave in his original TED Talk and still works now is Apple. Apple isn't perfect, but Apple, they communicate in a different way. If there were any other computer company, they'd start by talking about what they made. They'd talk about, we make great computers. They'd then move on to the how, which is they're beautifully designed, wonderfully manufactured, and easy to use. And then, do you want to buy one? And it kind of leaves you cold. And that's how most companies do their marketing, how most people communicate. But Apple is different. They start off with a why, and the marketing message from then goes something like this. They'd say, we believe everything we do challenges the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we do that is that we make products that are beautifully designed, wonderfully manufactured, and easy to use. We just happen to make computers. The message is completely different, but all we've done is reverse the order of information. And if you're the sort of person who believes in what Apple believes, chances are you'll choose to buy their products or work for them or just be fans of them. And that's how it works, whether we're talking about Apple or talking about iconic brands, I don't know, Harley Davidson, Rolls-Royce motor cars. There's a whole host out there that have developed this ability to not only think and act starting with why, but importantly, communicate starting with why. And that is the tricky thing, because the why comes from the part of the brain that's responsible for all decision making, all human behavior, and yet has got no capacity for language. And so it is a challenge to start communicating with why, because we tend to communicate starting with what. So when we're working with organizations, from individuals up to the largest organizations, we help them communicate that why and act consistent with that why. Because when you do act consistent with your why, either as an individual or as an organization, it builds trust and loyalty. And then everything you say, everything you do adds to that trust and loyalty that people feel towards you. So that's the essence of what we teach organizations to do.
When you say it builds trust and loyalty, can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, how does starting with why help you build trust and loyalty?
Well, starting with why is not just a nice little idea. It's actually grounded in biology. So if you take a cross-section of the human brain, it divides into two main components, which match perfectly with what we call the golden circle, the why, how, what. The first is the neocortex, and that's the relatively modern part of the brain, which is responsible for understanding facts and figures and data and also speech. And that maps onto the what part of this golden circle. But then you've got the limbic brain. And the limbic brain is the old part of the brain. It goes back well over 50,000 years. And that maps onto the why and the how level of the golden circle. And the limbic brain is responsible for feelings such as trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all that decision making and all human behavior. It just doesn't have any capacity for language. And this is why we often hear ourselves saying, yes, I understand all the facts and figures and data, but it just doesn't feel right. And we use that verb, it doesn't feel right, because the decision's coming from our limbic brain that's responsible for all decisions, but has got no capacity for language. And the best we can come up with is it just doesn't feel right. So we talk about leading with our heart or our gut or intuition. It's nothing to do with that. It's our limbic brain. So when we learn how to communicate, starting with why, we communicate directly to the part of the brain that makes all of those decisions in everyone and builds that trust and loyalty. And that's how it works.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when you said it goes back to biology, that's when it really clicked with me. I mean, really, if you go deeper than this, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but really, if you look at human beings and why we do anything, why do we eat? Well, it's not just because we're hungry and food is good. It's we eat so we can survive, right? Why do we want shelter? We want shelter not just because it's nice to have a home, like nice to be in a home and a nice home. It's like shelter is something. It helps, again, it protects us. It helps us survive. Or gosh, you go as far as sex, I mean, why do we want to reproduce? There's a reason, we want to propagate our species and our kind and our family and our lineage, etc. So much deeper than that, but we don't really think about it like that. We just think about the what.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, to be honest, Jim, we're quite simple animals. We are animals. Sure. We're emotional animals. And the thing about this biological connection that Simon identified with the golden circle is that it trumps psychology and science and anything else. It is biology. It's the most basic biology actually you can get to. It's neuroscience 101, this stuff that I've just explained to you. And when we realize that we're just an ancient machine working in a modern world, when we realize that, we can choose to work with the biology instead of in spite of it. And when we do that, it actually can make things very, very simple, and help us find our way through the clutter of complexity that is modern day life and business. And also, it takes us right back to what it is to be human. It's fundamental to what it is to be human. And when we realize that, then things tend to work a lot better.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's crystal clear. There's a book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh of Zappos. Okay. And Tony Hsieh, he bought this shoe company. He built a company, early on in the internet years and sold it for like almost $300 million and to Microsoft. And then he built, and then he bought this shoe company, right? People are like, what are you doing buying a shoe company? Well, in his whole philosophy, I should say that the shoe company went on to be extremely successful. It's Zappos. Now they're selling shoes and all kinds of other things online. Yeah. I think it might have gotten purchased by Amazon in the last few years. But his whole philosophy is delivering happiness. I mean, their customer service is just off the charts. I mean, there's stories of people calling their customer service line, their 800 number, and asking for a pizza to be delivered. And they actually did it. They actually delivered a pizza, right? But they just, their whole purpose is delivering happiness. Has nothing to do with shoes or clothing that they deliver now. It's all about happiness. It's about delivering happiness. And that's their why. You talk about Apple and it's the same thing.
Yeah. Zappos is a company we know very well indeed. And this is a great example. We normally talk about a why statement, which is a very simple statement, single sentence, talking about the contribution we make in the world and the impacts of that contribution. Those two components give us what we call the why statement. And, for example, my why is to enable people to be extraordinary in what they do. So the contribution is me enabling. The impact of that is so as people can go on and be more extraordinary in whatever they're passionate about. And with Zappos, their what is they make shoes. But the reason they do it is all tied back to what they believe, which is bringing a bit of happiness to people's lives. And, by the way, if you don't have any shoes, then it can be fairly miserable. So, what then happens is everything they say and do just acts as proof of what they believe. And this is what generates the great customer service that they are famous for, where the people on the phone providing the sales and customer service, they are empowered by this why, this higher purpose, this common belief. They are empowered to do the right thing for the customers they serve. And that might involve sending pizza around, or I recall there's a story of sending flowers around when a customer they sent shoes to. They eventually got a note back, and the shoes were for this guy who actually died. And the wife of the late husband wrote a note and to explain why they didn't need the shoes anymore. And the salesperson on the phone just chose to send flowers around because it was the right thing to do. They didn't need to check further up the line to get permission. It was just in tune with what they believe. And when you are empowered through a why, when everyone in an organization is empowered through that why, to take the actions which just feel right, then it helps to build trust and loyalty, not only the customers they serve, but also inside the organization too. If you're the sort of person who believes in doing small acts to create moments of happiness for people, then perhaps that company, Zappos, is a company that you'd like to be a part of as an employee, or maybe a customer, or somebody who just cheers for them. This is how it works. This is the power of getting clear on your why. But it's only when you can put into words that you can then put into action intentionally, because otherwise it just resides as a feeling and you can't have a conversation about it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said it's only when you can put it into words that you can put it into action. So it's actually hitting the pause button on your life and actually taking the time to put this into words, to be conscious of it. Zappos doesn't have anything in their policy handbook, I can imagine, that says if someone asks you to deliver pizza, or if someone, if a lady sends her shoes back and says her husband passed away, you send her. There's no policy that says that, right? Like you said, it's empowering to know your why. Whether you're a parent or a sports team coach or an entrepreneur or a manager or just an employee at a company, when you know your why, it's empowering, right? I imagine it cuts down on the need for some rules and regulations and policy. Am I right?
Totally. I mean, a great example, Jim. Some years ago, I was working with a TV network and film company on the West Coast, and we took them through a why discovery process. And we discovered their why. We'd started putting into words, and we went into a coffee break. And this woman who turned out to be the HR director, she jumped up from her seat and almost ran across the room to a guy who turned out to be the operations director. And they started talking in a very animated way. And I went up to them and I said, "Is everything all right?" She said, "Absolutely," she said. It turned out that they'd been trying to hire somebody to fill a senior position, which had been empty for about 3 months. And they were really hurting because this position was empty. And yet they'd only got one candidate. And this candidate had got all of the right qualifications and experience, fitted the bill perfectly, it would seem. But they hadn't been able to make a decision until this moment. I said, "What decision have you made?" She said, "We've decided not to hire him." I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Now that we know our why, we realize that he would not be a good fit because he doesn't believe what we believe. And we would spend all of our time managing him rather than just leading him." And this is the thing. The goal is not, when you know your why, the goal is not to hire everyone who needs a job. The goal is to hire people who believe what you believe, because then you can lead them rather than having to spend a lot of time managing them. So at that moment, they decided that they would take the short-term pain for a little bit longer until they found somebody, yes, with all the right skills and experience, and importantly, the right belief where they would fit seamlessly into the organization.
So it's really a core or a foundation from which you can make decisions, whether they're hiring decisions, firing decisions,
totally,
restructuring, et cetera.
It always amazes me how many organizations these days hire on skills. You can train skills. You can't train belief or passion. And when I look at my own background, when I was hired to be a pilot in the Royal Air Force, I couldn't fly an aeroplane. What they did was they went through a long process with me, as they still do today, to identify whether I had the core values and beliefs that would fit within the organization. They then spent many millions of pounds training me and giving me the skills to fly aeroplanes. And that's how the military do it, whether it's over in the UK or in the US. US Marine Corps is a great example. And indeed, my son has recently joined the Royal Marines, and they spent a lot of time checking that person's values and beliefs are in tune with what the organization believes, because then they know that they have a clear foundation on which to build all the skills, and that person will stay loyal and will be willing to serve. And service is about sacrifice. And, it's very apparent in the military, where quite often you're asked to put yourself in harm's way. That is the ultimate service. So that is why the forces spend so much time checking that the culture and the person are a good fit.
So it makes complete sense. If you hire, you can hire somebody who has the skills, but if they don't have the passion and the, their why doesn't align with the companies or the organization, then it's not going to work. I don't care how much you pay them, et cetera. It's not going to work. But it seems so simple, right? We get this, right? But why is it not really part of our conscious? Why does it not? It's obviously catching hold, and you guys have started a movement with Start With Why. But why is that not just intuitive? Maybe it is intuitive, but why do we not act on it?
Well, it's a couple of reasons. First of all, I have a clear distinction, which helps us here, I think, between management and leadership. Management is about handling complexity. Leadership is about creating simplicity. And the simplest thing in leadership is to be clear on what you stand for, your higher purpose, your cause, your belief, your why. But as human beings, we're naturally attracted to complexity, and never more so than in business. You know, when you are in an organization and you've worked your way up the ladder, you generally do that because of your ability to understand and to know the answer. And it's very management focused. You know, it feels good as the manager to have the answer when people come to you and with a problem. It feels good to know that answer. And quite often, you know, we find that it's good to have that information or that knowledge that others don't have, because it makes you feel higher up the hierarchy. You know, it feels good to know stuff that other people don't. And so we spend many of our years in life going to school, college, whatever, developing our neocortex, our ability to understand facts and figures and complexity. And then we employ that when we go to work in organizations. But understanding complexity and managing people and knowing the answer has little to do with leadership. Leadership is about being clear on your purpose, being clear on where you're heading, being very clear on that vision of how bringing your why to life, what that looks like in the future, and to have unshakable commitment to that, and being willing to make yourself vulnerable by saying, look, this is where I'm heading, this is where we're heading, and opening yourself up to probably criticism and doubters, but being steadfast in what you believe. I mean, let's go back to the Apple example. Years ago, when Apple was very small, people thought they were mad to develop their own operating system. They thought they were mad to want to make laptops out of aluminium or aluminum, as you would say. But they just put their head down and stuck to what they believed. And now they're the largest capitalized company in the world. So this is the essence of leadership, getting clear on what you believe, being clear in the way you articulate that, and then creating a space into which others can step to help you bring the vision of the world you imagine to life. And when you attract people who believe what you believe, when they feel inspired, then they can help you work out how to get there. But we have, I believe in business, we have an overemphasis on management and the complex, when what people need is a bit of simplicity. As Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the greatest sophistication. It isn't necessarily easy, but when you can put things into very simple words that everyone can understand, then it creates the opportunity for people to come and join you in your cause. And if we look back in history, great leaders, let's say political leaders, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and many, many others, Malala, these people were able to put into very simple words what it is they believed, what they stand for, what they stood for, and create a vision of the world they imagine. And that's what inspired people to come and join them, to help them bring that vision to life.
Yeah, starting with what does not motivate and inspire. Starting with why does.
It doesn't at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, you can see that in so many areas of society and culture, whether it's businesses or otherwise. See, we talked about Zappos. We talked about Apple. You mentioned the HR rep who had that aha moment. Do you have any other stories about, like, whether it's a company or an individual who had that aha moment, or a company that made a significant pivot because of working with you guys and start with why philosophy? Sure.
I mean, there's lots. Let's give you a couple. One from the company down perspective and one from the individual up perspective.
Yeah, great.
So there was a healthcare company I spent some time with in the States, and the healthcare company was very clear on its why. Got very clear on it, and its why was the effect of to enable their community to thrive. Notice it doesn't say anything about what they do. It's why they do it. And how they did that, they had a lot of focus and expertise in medicine, obviously, and the commitment to excellence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they did was they provided hospitals, general practice surgeries, and so on and so forth. But also another what that they did is that they provided, and I think still provide, free swimming lessons for every kid in the state. You think, hang on, a healthcare company providing swimming lessons for kids, what's that all about? But when you refer back to their why, to enable their community to thrive, it makes complete sense. Why wouldn't you want to help your kids to learn how to swim so as they can enjoy the water safely? That's part of thriving. And I went into one of their hospitals a little while later and was just walking the corridors. I came across this guy called John. And John was probably in his late 60s, early 70s, maybe older, I don't know. But he'd been there for well over 40 years. And he was quite bent over. What he did, he pushed trolleys, gurneys around from the ER and wherever they were needed. And anyway, I pulled John over and I said, hey, John, I said, just tell me, I said, you work very, very hard, long hours. I imagine you could have retired a while ago. What's the reason you're still here? And Johnny paused. He pushed the empty gurney over to the side of the corridor and stood up just a little bit straighter. He was very aware of the organization's why. And he turned to me and he said, I save people's lives. If I didn't push these patients on these gurneys from the ER up to the operating theatres, the doctors wouldn't be able to do their job. Wow. I save people's lives. Now, the thing is, Jim, had any manager come down and told him that's the reason he did what he did? Of course they hadn't. He had heard the very clear, simple message from the senior people in the company as to why it is they do what they do. And he had discovered for himself his way of fitting into that.
Yeah.
And when people have this emotional connection, remember, we're emotional animals. When people have got this emotional connection to why it is they do what they do, they can surmount huge obstacles. And also it releases that incredible thing called discretionary effort, where people are choosing to work more than they need to. And in John's case, what that looked like was at the end of his shift, the managers would try and kick him out the ER, say, John, just go home. He'd say, oh, no, one more patient. And that's the energy that being connected to your why creates and releases. So that's from the company down. Then from the individual up, John, yes, was an individual, but looking at it from the other end of the pipe, well, it's great. He's a great guy, probably still working there. I had the privilege of doing a why discovery for a young woman, a friend of my daughter's, and let's call her Emily. And Emily still is a very bright young woman. She got a scholarship to Oxford University, which I understand is quite a good school to go to. And and she did very, very well. And she was sort of being headhunted, I guess, for jobs afterwards. And I fortunately was able to do a wide discovery for her before she went off to this particular job interview. And she arrived on the day for the job interview, and she told me afterwards she sat down. It was the typical old classic interview, the lonely chair for the candidate in the middle of quite a large room, and a panel of 4 dusty-looking gentlemen sitting behind tables, shuffling papers as she walked in. But anyway, she sat down on this chair and put her hands in her lap, and eventually one of the interviewers looked up. And their opening shot, he turned to Emily and said, so, Emily, there's lots of people who've applied for this position. Tell me, what are you going to bring to our company if you get the job? And she sat there quite calmly. And she said, before I tell you that, she said, let me tell you the reason I get out of bed every day. Wow. She said, I get up inspired by the possibility of walking with others alongside them to enable them to be all they can be. I happen to notice from your website that that's exactly the sort of thing that you believe in too. why wouldn't I apply to come and work with you?
Hmm.
Furthermore, I've got these skills and strengths which I believe will help contribute to creating the image of the world that you imagine. What do you think happened?
Yeah, it probably moved them pretty quickly. I don't know.
Oh, they hired her on the spot.
On the spot, yeah.
In that moment, all of the guys on that panel looked up and their limbic brains said, this person is one of us. How do we get her on board?
Yeah, sure.
They then looked at her resume and probably thought, well, you know what, she's not got much experience, but hey, she's only just come out of college. That's what you'd expect. That's all right. Let's find her something to do in our organization. She is one of us. This is how our brains work. This is how the decision-making process works. The limbic brain, in this case, resonated with what she said because it was authentic, it was genuine, it's not rehearsed. She was speaking, as we would say, from the heart, actually from the limbic brain. And then their neocortex kicked in, interpreting the facts and figures in front of them and decide, yeah, absolutely, let's get her in here. You know, I often speak with people, Jim, in sort of businesses, investment bankers or whatever, who say, well, there's no room for emotion in this business. I said, oh, really? I said, I hear Wall Street was down last week. The papers said the sentiment of the market was down. What's sentiment if it's not a feeling?
Yeah, bingo.
This is how the world works. I was spending some time with some police officers in this country, and they looked up and they said, well, this is all a bit emotional, this stuff. I said, right, when were you last in court? And one of them said, you know, quite proudly, I was in there last week. I said, what did you do? Well, I presented all the facts of the case. I said, excellent. And when the jury returned their verdict, was it based on facts or was it based on whether they felt the defendant was guilty or not?
Right.
This is the great irony for me. The whole of our system or systems seems to work on facts, but actually it works on feeling. Whether we're talking about the stock market going up or down, that's based on feeling, or whether we're talking about whether we choose to lock somebody up in a prison or not, finding them guilty, that's based on feeling. Yes, informed by fact, but it's feeling. How do we feel about a situation? We then interpret what we see through that lens. This is how the world works. And it's exactly the same in business as it is in wider society, as it is at home with our kids, with our children. It works exactly the same. You know, a family has got its own values, its own belief, if you like, its own why. And we bring our kids up to, we hope, be in tune with that why and that belief. And we hope they go on to find partners in life, life partners who also share that belief. But often we don't speak about it in words that we can use to interpret it and to carry it forward. But we're just the same ancient machine, whether we're at home or at work or anywhere else. We're just human beings, this ancient machine in a modern world.
It's interesting you mentioned about, you know, at home with parents and families, you know, like you can tell I've got 4 kids. I can tell them why they've got to take out the trash or you know, do the dishes or whatever the case might be. Or I can tell them that. I can tell them the fact that you have to do the dishes, which is a struggle. But if I can talk to them a little bit about why we need your help, why this is a job, why giving you chores is going to make you more responsible, and if we can trust you with this, we can trust you with more other things. If we can talk to them about that why, it inspires them in some small way. I mean, we're talking about doing the dishes, but it's like it's a big thing.
It does. Although, Jim, we've got to be a little bit careful how we use this word why, because we use it as a noun with a capital W, shorthand for higher purpose, cause, or belief. So, why we're asking them to do the dishes, we can approach it at the level of, well, I need to do the dishes because I'm doing a bunch of other stuff. That is using why with a lowercase w. When we're using why with a high case W, the conversation would be around, what are we trying to achieve as a family here? We're trying to achieve a home that we all love, where we all have our time to grow and to make choices in life. And so we all need to work together to enable that to happen. We're a family that has got values, and one of those values is that we all help one another, so we can achieve more together than we would individually. Right. That is a higher purpose type conversation.
Yeah, how does this chore align with the why of your family why?
The chore itself is just a what. or maybe part of the house, but the why is what we stand for as a family, because together we are much stronger than individuals. And when families are aligned along common purpose, common higher purpose, common values, then those families tend to work pretty well. Like any organization, a family is a mini tribe. Going back 50,000 years, why tribes came together was because they believed fundamentally in the same sort of values, same sort of things, higher purpose. The modern day tribe is, beyond the family, the modern day tribe is the workplace. And so the best organizations are those that are families, not like a family, but are families. That's how we get the best out of our people.
Yeah, and so we've talked about how this is relevant for entrepreneurs, how this is relevant for families. And I imagine, Peter, I've got a lot of sports coaches that listen to this. And I imagine this is directly relevant to a team as well, a sports team.
Totally. Any sports coach will recognize that, sport, there isn't much logic in sport, not really. It is something that we don't have to do. We choose to do. As a player, the team that is even the underdog, if they're really committed to the difference they can make by winning a game, perhaps they are playing in their hometown. Yeah, that's a great example. They might be the underdogs, but they're playing in their hometown, and maybe they haven't won for many, many years. And a great coach can inspire them around the possibility of winning that game and the difference it will make, not just to them, but the pride it will bring to the town. This is just one simple example. Equally, as a spectator, we are emotionally connected to the team that we're supporting. It's not a logical thing, it's an emotional thing. This is why we cheer when they score or win, and why tears are shed. It's highly illogical, really, but it's expressing who we are as emotional animals. So the team that plays together in service of one another is the team that's going to prevail. The team that plays as a bunch of individuals, and I have to say some might disagree, but sometimes the English soccer team plays as a bunch of individuals, because you've got all of these talented, highly praised and highly compensated players who, some of them, it's just about them, Sure. And so they want to make their mark in that international game. And that's the time when they don't do well. But the teams that are there for their country, that are there because they passionately believe in bringing back a cup, not for themselves, but for their country, or a medal, or whatever it is, the symbol that states that they have prevailed, then it's that team that is going to make the sacrifice. It's that team where, when the player gets knocked down, is going to get up just that little bit quicker. It's that team that's going to believe in themselves, no matter how many points down they are. It's that inner belief, that emotional connection, that is going to drive them towards success in the context of that game.
Yeah, no question. It's a perfect fit for the sports analogy. And Peter, so the title of the show is Success Through Failure. When you understand your why, if you understand deep down what your purpose is and what your why is, then failure is just it's going to be much easier to get up after you fail. Every single time you fail, you're going to be able to get up if you know your why, if you have your purpose, if you understand it. You're going to find ways around, under, over, through obstacles if you know your why. Can you share a time with us that maybe where you experienced failure? I mean, obviously you've done amazing things. You worked with amazing companies. You're very successful at what you've done, whether it's as a pilot, as a speaker, as a consultant. Can you share with us a time where you failed, maybe felt that hopelessness, that despair, that self-doubt that comes with failure, and how you came through that?
Absolutely. Before I do that, you mentioned the word success, which some might consider to be the opposite of failure. So let me tell you what I define as success. Success is the joy you feel when you come home at night. Success is not measured on a balance sheet or a paycheck. Success is that joy you feel when you come home at night. So that's what we're striving for. If we experience something that we call failure, I have a different perspective on failure. You know, context is everything, Jim. And what I've learned in my life is times that when I felt it was something that, when I've hit something where I've failed, when I look back, I see it as just a small stepping stone towards what I would consider success, i.e. being able to go home at night feeling the joy. And I remember, well, the time that springs to mind, I guess, was in my flying career in the Royal Air Force. You know, training to be a pilot, particularly in the military, you are tested and checked more frequently than doctors are. You know, when I was flying in the Air Force, we were checked every month for an hour or two in the simulator. We were checked more thoroughly every 6 months, checked more thoroughly every 12 months. We had intermediate checks amongst all that, surprise checks. Everything we did, we were checked and assessed. And that was the environment. And it kept your professional standards up and allows you to progress as well. But I remember the time when, you know, I was doing great as a pilot. I was flying the Prime Minister, as you mentioned at the opening of this program. But then I hit a point where I was changing role on the aeroplane. I was becoming a captain on the aircraft, and things weren't going well in that training. And I remember sitting on the grass outside the training school with my instructor, a lovely old gent called Ollie Alderson. And, you know, he had a heart-to-heart with me. He said, look, we've given you all the flex we can, all the extra time we can, but you know what? Tomorrow is your last chance. You fail quite a few checks. Tomorrow is your last chance. And unless you come through, we've got to pull the plug, which, you know, is the end of your career, everything. And that puts a lot of pressure on you. And yeah, I had failed a lot in that traditional sense. But the following day, I managed to prevail. I managed to come through. I managed just to make the grade. That didn't mean it was all plain sailing thereafter. But I could look back and say, well, yeah, in some ways I failed getting on the way to that point. But it's what makes you who you are. You know, people measure your success by what they see on the outside, but actually success is also about how you approach failure on the inside. In other words, every hiccup, every trip up as you go through life, how you respond to that internally, your attitude, your perception towards it defines your character. And all the times when people may look upon the times when I've failed, actually the way I look at it is that it's opened up other possibility, or it's strengthened my character to be able to take on even tougher challenges in the future. So my perception of failure is not, you know, a point event where I failed. It's actually a stepping stone to success and moving forward. That's my approach to failure.
In my TEDx talk titled "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," I say almost verbatim the exact thing of what you just said. You know, I say failure is not the opposite of success; it's actually a necessary step on the path to success. It's not; they're not opposites. I think that's hugely important. It's down to perception, Jim, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
how we perceive a situation. If we perceive it as a failure being, well, that's the end point, that's it, then that's going to dictate the actions we take in the world and therefore the results we get. However, if we see it as a bit of an opportunity, then it dictates different actions. I have a thing just very quickly, a distinction: problem, challenge, and opportunity. There is a difference. A problem is static. whereas challenge and opportunity are active. So let's go back to sport, because that's a good example. Now, I'm not an expert in American football, but I know enough to give you this analogy. So think of two teams, two sides opposing each other, the attacking team and defending team. If you see a problem is static and it's just in your way and there's no energy in it. It's like the attacking team facing off the defending team before the whistle has gone. It's just static. And we have problems in our lives which just sit there doing nothing because we're not ready to take them on. But then going back to the football game, when the whistle goes, should we choose, we can turn that problem into a challenge. And we turn that problem into a challenge when we choose to attack and we move forward and take on what's in front of us. There's energy involved. And that energy and that courage comes from our why, our belief, our higher purpose, our cause, being in service of others. And as we fight through that defensive line, that challenge, and we start to see a clearing, that's when the challenge turns to opportunity. An opportunity in this example is the touchdown line. And we can make that line, and then opportunities start to blossom. So, whether we're talking about failure or whether we're talking about problems in our lives, problems, challenge, opportunity, it's all dependent on our perspective, how we perceive the situation, and how we choose to attack, and how we choose to find the courage to move forward and take these things on. And sometimes we're not ready to take on problems, in which case that's okay. There's nothing worse than people saying, oh, you should see that problem as an opportunity, when we're not ready to take it on and transform it from being a problem to a challenge and then being an opportunity. And when we have these distinctions on our mind, it helps us figure out what it is we choose to do next. And the energy for that, the inspiration for that, the courage for that comes from our why, our higher purpose, our cause, our belief.
Yeah, you said it. Start with why. Peter, thanks so much for making time for this. This was just absolutely incredible. I appreciate your time. Can you share with the audience, with the listeners, where we can find you, follow you, etc.?
Sure. You can find me and the rest of the Start With Why team on startwithwhy.com. If you want to discover your own why, you can find tools on that website to help you do just that. I also have my own website, which is called whynotunlimited.com, and there are other tools around how to harness the power of why there. And you can find me in the usual places, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., just by looking for my name.
Excellent. And for the listener, I will have links to everything you just mentioned there in the action plan, jimharshawjr.com/action, to grab that PDF with the links, as well as a lot of quotes and just sort of excerpts from this show. Peter, I think it's going to impact a lot of lives just listening to this interview, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for making the time. And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.
Success Through Failure is a member of the Athlete on Fire podcast network. Check out all of our shows at athleteonfire.com.